Mr. Chamat, please.
Thanks, Larry. We in the Libertarian Party have a huge opportunity in 2024. I think all of us recognize that. Polling data, for example, show that more Americans than ever before are open to the idea of a third party. And for reasons that we as libertarians should well understand, both Democrats and Republicans are dissatisfied with their respective parties, not just because they have crappy leadership, which of course they do, but also because I think there's a growing recognition in the United States that many of our most important problems are the result of bad public policy. I believe that to capitalize on our opportunity, we have to run the right type of campaign. That means learning some tough lessons from our past mistakes. We have to run a campaign that's focused on policy that cleaves hard edges against the other parties, that'll define our brand, that'll make us memorable. I'm running on a platform that does just this, which we call the Gold New Deal, because we believe that we need a new relationship between us and the government that we're willing to tolerate. I also believe that we have to put forward the right type of candidate, one who represents a credible threat to disrupt the usual two-party race, a candidate to whom voters will listen because they believe in someone who could be relevant to the process. I believe I am that candidate. My entire career has been spent in public service and public policy and entrepreneurship. I put forward a platform of the most transformative ideas, but I back those up with credible solutions, solutions that speak to the real problems that real Americans are facing.
Oftentimes we can sit here and talk about a lot of things, but action and getting the task done is most important.
Mr. Chamat, tell me, how do you feel about that?
I feel not too bad about that, but not too good about that either. The answer to the question is we have to make a presidential debate that's nationally televised. I think that's absolutely critical. To do that, we'll have to get a certain amount of success in early polls. That means spending money in a certain way, bold, loud, and early, namely. We need the poll numbers to get up to get into those early debates. We don't know what those are going to look like at this point. To be honest, at this point, we don't even know whether debates will be held, but I think that someone will step up to the plate and organize those. That's where we really have an opportunity to build our brand. Chase is right. We are the chief brand officer, and you only have to look at the past 2 or 3 cycles to see the missed opportunities that we've had. We need to be out there with policies that speak to people, but that differentiate us completely from the other parties. Our job is not to find common ground with the other party's politicians. It's to find common ground with other parties' voters and to differentiate us from the other politicians.
So hold on, let me then say, are you saying that if we get the debate, then that's a victory? Like that's also a win. It's another form of victory, getting in the debates.
Absolutely. And it'll catapult us into greater types of victory.
I'm not really sure if it's the most highlighted topic to reach the community with. Lars might want to do ad spends, and will vaccines and lockdowns be associated with that? I'm not really sure. But we have a lot of work to do. And so education and defining libertarianism is definitely important.
Chrissie, if I may, I think that one of the reasons why the issue that you brought up is so important is because it's emblematic of how a lot of Americans feel about the government in so many other areas. Going forward, some of the biggest risks that we face going forward are risks of our government misplaying the issue. We have climate change going on, for example. Do you trust your federal government to handle climate change? Or do you expect our government will impose industrial policy on us, screw up our economy, shut down certain aspects, force regulations on other aspects of our economy, trying to figure out what to do, and it costs us $1 trillion again, and we're right back in the same soup as we were over COVID-related shutdowns? Do you trust the federal government to handle China? China presents such a huge risk to us, not just because of the Chinese government, because of the silly ways our government reacts to it. You look at our economy, you look at our war machine, you look at all of the resources that our federal government spends incorrectly, the risks that we face are from our government. And I think people are awakening to that in a way that they never were aware before. So I think it's very important that we make the point that the management of the situation under COVID was badly handled, and that you don't want a Republican or a Democrat in charge when facing the next crisis.
Yeah, definitely. Lars?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I have been doing a lot of memes. It's a new thing to me, but it's what I've been doing a lot of for the last 6 or 9 months.
In other words, are we just going to be able to talk about it and we'll be the only ones talking? Or are we going to have a different way of talking about it? Which one were you talking about, Mr. Chamath?
We're going to have a different way of talking about it. And I think the good news here is that Republicans and Democrats have been merging together for a couple of decades, and it won't be hard to differentiate ourselves from them. Neither one is fiscally conservative anymore. They both buy into spending all kinds of money, whereas we need to be the ones out there talking about capping spending. They're the ones out there who they may complain from time to time about inflation, but they're both uber supportive of the Federal Reserve System. We need to be the ones out there talking about ending the Fed. I think, as everybody knows, I've got a 3-point plan on my website to do just that, starting with taking away the Fed's monetary policy in a discretionary fashion and replacing it with a rules-based system. We can all have a food fight about what we want that rule to be. But the bottom line is the Fed has to go, and no other party is going to be talking about that.
Mr. Chamath, you have won the nomination. You raised $5 million. How do you spend it?
You spend it fast and loud. You spend it in a way that differentiates yourself from everybody else, and it has to be spent very quickly. The object of the game is not to say, well, you know, I got $5 million and I got 5 months. I'm going to spend $1 million a month. That's not how this works. You need to spend it as quickly as possible. If you have $250,000 in your bank account, you're doing something wrong. You got to spend that sucker by 5 p.m. The point is to get a snowball effect. Money makes money. So you need to be out there differentiating and branding, and to the point that we've been discussing, pushing on social media. Of course, the two have to work hand in hand, right? But it has to be spent quickly, and it has to be very, very loud. As I mentioned before, the name of the game is to build our brand, not only for the objective of raising more money and getting higher in the polls and getting into the debates. You know, there's that snowball, but also because we are responsible for building the brand for the benefit of the down ballot candidates. You know, in the past, our presidential nominees have not done everything they could to help local candidates in terms of differentiating us from the other parties.
We need to end prohibition altogether, and that will get rid of a lot of the police state problems that we have right now.
Chrissie, if I may, the problem that we face is actually, in my view, bigger than merely the war on drugs. And the war on drugs is an insanely counterproductive policy, so don't misread me. Anytime you create black markets, you cause havoc, both in terms of crime and health in this case. But as a recently retired police officer after 11 years on the streets, I can tell you that we have a police culture problem. We are going in the right direction. I saw progress even in the relatively brief 11 years that I served, but we have a problem nonetheless. I believe that courts are far too deferential to police officers, and that is the big reason why we need to give up qualified immunity, not because it affects so many cases, but because it can speak to how we want police culture to evolve. Changing police culture is going to take a long time. It's going to require a lot of patience, but there are things that we can do right away to accelerate that process. And I believe that replacing qualified immunity with requirements that police officers be bonded by private sector liability insurance is a big step in the right direction. If police officers feel the pinch in terms of their premium rates, it'll be an extra incentive to keep Leo in place. I think that we need to make police much more like other businesses in the United States, including other high liability industries like surgeons, for example. Surgeons don't have qualified immunity where we say, well, if I made a mistake, you know, suck it up, I didn't mean to. That's not how it works. Doctors are required to get liability insurance to stay in business. Malpractice insurance is what they call it. We need a form of malpractice insurance in police work as well.
One of my goals is to abolish the municipal police department. A mayor should never have full control over a police department. And so one of the alternatives might be is creating a police agency at the state level. Let them control police. Police are only there to investigate. They're not there to stop crimes. They only show up to them. And so your best defense is your Second Amendment right to bear arms. That's your responsibility to do that. We can't just rely on law enforcement. And so when we think about changes in our community, it's really about abolishing the police department.
Agreed.
I'm just okay. I think I have a follow-up mini question, and anybody can answer this. I live in Westchester, and I'm in New York City like at least once a week. And the last time I checked in on some of my cop friends, like I got the sense, especially after the summer of love, that many of them are kind of like afraid to do their jobs, and you know they don't want to look a certain way. Everyone's got a camera. Do you guys think that what you're proposing in lieu of what is this, the qualified immunity? Do you think that will help with that issue or that sort of like trepidation that some of these officers have?
Over time, Chrissie, but it's going to take a while. Right now, police officers are very leery of the idea of giving up qualified immunity. But if given time, they will come to understand that making their business more like other industries means that the good ones will make more money, the bad ones will be rooted out, the mediocre will make less money, and it'll be good for everyone. As far as concentrating power at the state level, I could not disagree more. I don't want police controlled all at the state level. It has to be as decentralized as possible. What we find is that when a police department goes bad, sometimes it has to be replaced lock, stock, and barrel. We need more competition for who provides those police services at the most granular level possible. I shudder to think what would happen if the state in which I live had a bad state police department and they ran the entire state, and now I got to find a way to replace them. That makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck.
And I have not been asking caucus affiliations of the people I've been speaking to. It just so happens that I've been speaking to, and my message has been resonating with people all across the spectrum. I think that's what any 2024 candidate is going to have to be doing, is not displaying one party wing interests or another. In fact, the further I can stay away from the infighting within this party as a candidate for president, I think that's the better for us, because our job is not to contribute to the infighting. Our job is to provide a better way forward, a better path forward, a message that is broadly positive, and you don't get that with infighting. So I can disagree with individual members on certain things or one thing or the other, or I can say, oh, the vice chair of whatever. You know, that doesn't really matter to the average voter. The average voter does not know who is in charge of the LNC. They don't know who's in charge of the state affiliates. They just know who the candidates are. The candidates are who pushes the messaging. And I think if we're going to put a unifying message out there, that's something that can really go forward. But I don't want to see us infighting. I think that we've wasted far too much time, far too much energy over who controls the inner workings of a party that most people don't understand what it is. So if we're going to be fighting for votes and for voters, we don't have time to be fighting with other libertarians. We have to be fighting the Republican and Democratic message and breaking through the two-party static. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I hope everybody here will be doing.
Larry, if I may, that's not the answer to the question. The answer to the question is, how are you going to unify the party? And the answer is that you have to understand what the various interests in this party are. There are many people in this party on the right and on the left who have been disappointed with the way campaigns have been run in the past. Let that sink in. This is not unimportant, right? We cannot run away from the idea that people feel differently throughout our party. This is why the team that I have put together represents all of the party. We have people on our team, both in terms of paid people and team advisors who are on the Mises caucus. We have people who are not in the Mises caucus. The one thing that we do not put up with on our team is people who are anti-Mises or anti-un-Mises, right? I participate, in fact, this past weekend, I had fantastic conversations with the boards of the other caucuses as well. I'm a big believer in the classical liberal caucus and the radical caucus as well. They've had very, very thoughtful conversations about a big issue that's been going on in our party, the Rage Against the War Machine program that's going to be held in Washington on Sunday. I encourage libertarians within driving distance to be there. My campaign is a sponsor, and there have been issues that have come up about that organization.
We've been fighting about that even, Mike. We've been fighting about that too.
Yeah, we've been fighting about that. But, you know, we wound up in a better place than we were a couple weeks ago. And now I think everyone should be fairly confident that we're going to have a great event and that the vast majority of speakers, if not everyone, there's no guarantees, right? But the vast majority of speakers are going to be on point and agreeing with us and our anti-war message. So I'm very, very excited about that. And I plan to be there myself. So I don't think that we're going to solve these problems by putting our head in the sand. We need to recognize that we need to run campaigns that listen to all the pieces of the party and that react to those and that represent the interests of everyone in our Libertarian Party.
So far, my messaging doesn't seem to piss anybody off. You know, so far the messaging that I'm putting forward, everybody seems to appreciate and like. You know, sometimes I get pushed back a little bit here and there, but I feel like that's the way to heal the party, is just come out with messaging that appeals to everybody and not the left-right message. That was my point, is that we got to stop the left-right messaging and get to ending the state, because that's the message that works for libertarians. The opposite of libertarian is authoritarian, right? That's the opposite. And so we want to end the authoritarian state. And it's not about the left-right stuff. There, like I said, there's plenty of people arguing that already in America. We don't need any more.
Mr. Rodriguez, you want to touch that?
Yeah, I'll just have a pretty much the same answer that I had before.
Okay.
Each state, you know, they have their own state rights, they have their own beliefs, they have their own organizations, and so they have their own special needs associated with their communities. And so my job as president of the United States, right, would be to support those communities in a different way. And you're going to go in and you're going to be boots on the ground and you're going to connect with those people. In my opinion, if people are going to have like social media fights and social media wars, that's fine. But that's not the goal. That's not the motivations of the Libertarian Party. It's really
Mike,
stop talking.
Let's question now or no? I'm sorry, Mike, did they answer your question now or no?
This particular question? This particular question, I don't believe has been fully answered. I think that we've got candidates in our panel who are very much anti one caucus or the other. I think that that's too bad. I know that my campaign is above that, but it did not rise above that by disregarding the issue. We rise above it by listening to everybody in the party and working with all the caucuses. We work with leadership in each one of the states and recognize that people have differences, but we're building a team that can bring everyone together.
Party.
That's a great T-shirt slogan. If we're fighting each other, we can't fight the state.
There we go.
I mean, turn into it like bathing suits or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr.
Rodriguez. We have to unite the, I'm a big believer that we have to unite this party. And that's why we're running the type of campaign that we are. I think that we need to realize we have various parts and we need to bring them all together.
I always say that politics is our ideal, but that's not what's practical. And what's practical is somewhere in the middle. And that's what we have to be aiming for, that we can say that our ideal is this and that we want to move toward that ideal, ending the Fed, abolishing taxes, but that the reality is going to end up somewhere in the middle there. And that's what we need to be targeting.
Okay, so if you could sum it up in a couple words, Lars, most damaging stereotype.
that we're just basically too radical. That we're too radical. That we need to, yeah, we need to get our messaging more mainstream so that people agree with us and get to some level of reducing the state. Because right now the two parties are not reducing the state, and so any level of reducing the state is better than where we're at right now.
True. Okay.
Chrissie, if I may, with all due respect, I don't think that that's the right answer. The right answer is that our worst stereotype is that we're out of touch with people's problems. It just so happens in this particular presidential cycle, we should be out there with the most transformative ideas possible, because our government is going in the wrong direction. Our government is actually in the business of hurting people right now. And I do not believe that we should be out there with messaging that is in any way compromised. I think End the Fed is a great example. It may well be that some years ago, End the Fed would have been considered too radical. Not anymore. People are of a mind that they understand that inflation doesn't grow on a tree. It comes from bad monetary policy. We need to be out there explaining why ending the Fed is the right move. As a professional economist for 25 years, this is absolutely in my wheelhouse. I don't put up with this idea that ending the Fed is just, you know, in la-la land. That's the direction that we need to be headed. Maybe, you know, it's going to take a long time and it has to be accomplished piecemeal. But telling people that we're going to fight inflation and the other parties don't care about inflation is the wrong message. We have institutional problems in our government. We need to go after them with very transformative ideas.
That is. We can say in the Fed, the average American is going to ignore what that is because they don't know what it is. And they don't have time in a 60-second soundbite to understand it. We can educate people, and that is a very important part of the party. But at this level, we need to be talking about things that they understand. Balancing the budget and combating inflation is using the language that fights central banking, but maybe in a way that the average voter understands. We all understand in the Fed because we're libertarians. The average voter is not one of us yet. We need to bring them into it, and you bring them into it speaking their language, not our language.
Yeah, the Fed goes over so many people's heads. It's like, it's not even, in my opinion, like a worthy catchphrase.
Most people think the federal government when you say in the Fed. They're like, okay, in the federal government, of course, you're a libertarian.
Okay, Joshua?
I think being out there saying we want to fight inflation ties us up with Republicans and Democrats. I wouldn't bother saying it.
And I have one I want to bring up, which is going to seem odd for some of you. But if I could, I want to direct this, if I could, to Mr. Chamath, to start with you. At what point should government be involved in education and or healthcare? Like many libertarians at the top go out totally. But looking at where we are now at this point, government is super involved in healthcare, super involved in education. So is this a point where we just abolish everything now? Do we tiptoe? Where should government be right now involved in education and in healthcare?
And it's no coincidence that those are the two businesses that are most screwed up in the United States.
Yes.
We need to not only make that point, but we need to be the North Star that says that is the direction in which we should be going. We should be getting government completely out of education and medicine, recognizing that we can't get it done by Tuesday at 3, but we need to be out there saying that's the direction that we need to go. The government got into medicine, not just through Medicaid and Medicare, which are completely abysmal, but through the tax code, inviting in a big way employer-provided insurance. And that's where the barn door was open and the horses ran out. So I don't think we should be under any false pretense thinking that this is going to be easy to unravel. But neither do I believe that we should be saying things like, well, you know, partial school vouchers for certain places in certain communities might be worth a thought. No, that's bullshit. All money that the federal government, the state government, and local governments raise for the purposes of education has to follow the child. And that means no matter where they go, including staying at home.
Here we go. Mr. Mapstead, you want to touch this? Where should government right now be involved in healthcare and education, recognizing that we don't want it, but it is right now completely in every aspect.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing is as president, you don't have a lot of control over the local level of education, but you do.
And it's our job to show the path and to let people know where it is that we want to get to. And he's right. Whether you're a minarchist or an anarchist, we're all going in the same direction. But I do believe the American people are ready to hear a message regarding taking a much bigger step in that direction than ever before. And so I would hate to think that we might make the mistake of suggesting to people that, you know, we're comfortable with baby steps. You know, if we have to, we will tolerate small steps one at a time, but don't have to be happy about it.
Yeah.
Look, FTX was garden variety fraud. Just because somebody steals your car doesn't mean we have a car market problem. This guy stole crypto from people, and he stole real US dollars as well. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with our currency markets. Now, as far as central banking getting into digital currency, this is something that we really don't want to happen. Just another reason why we need to end the Fed, by the way. But even if a central bank gets into this, I don't believe that they'll be sufficiently sophisticated to derail the progress that's likely to be made over the next half dozen years on the blockchains on which Bitcoin and Ethereum are running. We are in the next, certainly, if I had to guess, and I usually guess wrong, so take this with a grain of salt, I would guess that in the next dozen years, we will reach critical mass in terms of our economy moving real bold into smart contracting. And at that point, everyone's going to need a blockchain strategy who's in commercial business, and the currencies are really going to take off. The big risk in currency markets is that you're going to be left on the outside when they take off. That's the bigger risk than currency markets are going to tank.
Yep.
My campaign does represent a stark departure from what has represented us in the Libertarian Party in the past. This campaign has the credibility to interest voters who are used to tuning out because our candidates have been irrelevant. This campaign is built on a platform of the most transformative ideas. Check it out at goldnewdeal.org. And I personally have the background to back up those transformative ideas with real-world, realistic solutions. We've already begun building the team that's going to make executing on this plan possible, because we believe in 2024, we have more than just an opportunity. We have an obligation as libertarians. We believe that this is an obligation because the U.S. government is not going in the right direction. This is a government that hurts people. This government hurts people who are, frankly, ripped off by government spending, taxation, inflation. This government hurts people who are trapped in intergenerational poverty, robbed of opportunity, even robbed of aspiration by bad public school systems, bad housing policy, bad welfare programs. This government hurts people also who are undermined by the world's most oppressive criminal justice system, operating in concert with an insanely counterproductive war on drugs. And this government hurts people who are robbed by a war machine that steals our resources, too often steals our very lives, and to be honest, robs us even of our dignity in the sense that this war machine fails to adhere to our most basic values of peace and the pursuit of prosperity. For these reasons, I believe we have an obligation to put our best foot forward to the American people. I believe my campaign represents our best opportunity to do that.